91 meters beneath the surface of the Baltic Sea, sitting in complete darkness where sunlight has never once touched the seafloor, there is something that should not exist. It is 60 meters wide. It is perfectly circular, and it rests on top of an 8-meter-tall pillar that rises out of the mud like it was placed there on purpose. When a sonar team first captured its outline in 2011, the shape on their screen looked so unnatural that some of the world's most respected marine scientists refused to believe it was real. Others compared it to a spaceship. A few, only half joking, said it looked exactly like the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. 15 years later, in the summer of 2025, a brand new expedition, equipped with military-grade drones and university researchers, went back down to find out, once and for all, what is actually down there. What they found did not close the case. It reopened it. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why scientists are still stuck on this one. In June of 2011, a Swedish exploration team calling itself Ocean Explorer, or Ocean X, was searching the Gulf of Bothnia, the narrow stretch of water that separates Sweden from Finland. They were not looking for ancient mysteries or alien technology. They were treasure hunters, the kind of team that spends its time scanning old shipping lanes for sunken cargo, lost cannons, and forgotten wrecks from centuries of maritime trade. Their sonar equipment was designed to pick up exactly that kind of debris on the seafloor. What it picked up instead was something nobody on that boat expected to see. At a depth of roughly 91 meters, the sonar returned an image of a large, rounded shape sitting on the seabed. It was almost perfectly circular, spanning about 60 meters across, and directly underneath it was a raised column of material standing roughly 8 meters tall, almost like the object was propped up on a stand. Next to the main formation, the team also noticed something else, a long groove cut into the sediment, stretching nearly 300 meters away from the object, as if something heavy had slid or been dragged across the ocean floor before finally coming to rest. To a group of divers used to scanning for shipwrecks, this did not look like any wreck they had ever seen. For almost a year, the discovery stayed relatively quiet, known mostly within diving and exploration circles. That changed in 2012, when the story reached the Daily Mail, one of the most widely read tabloid outlets in the world. The moment the grainy sonar image was published alongside a headline suggesting it might be a sunken UFO, the story exploded across the internet. Editors and amateur enthusiasts began redrawing and enhancing the blurry sonar outline, and the shape that emerged bore a striking resemblance to the Millennium Falcon, the fictional spacecraft from Star Wars. That comparison alone was enough to send the story into a different stratosphere of public attention. Within days, theories were multiplying faster than anyone could fact-check them. Some corners of the internet insisted this was proof of extraterrestrial visitation, a crashed spacecraft that had been sitting on the Baltic Sea floor for who knows how many thousands of years. Others leaned toward a more grounded, though still dramatic, explanation. A secret Cold War-era anti-submarine device, built by either NATO or the Soviet Navy, and later abandoned. A smaller group speculated it might be tied to Atlantis, or some undiscovered ancient civilization that had once lived along what is now a submerged coastline. The object had, in the span of a few news cycles, become one of the most talked-about ocean mysteries of the 21st century. Before diving into the theories, it helps to understand exactly what the sonar data showed, because the physical description alone is genuinely strange. The main body of the formation is roughly circular, 60 meters in diameter, which is longer than half a football field. It sits atop a raised pillar of material that stands about 8 meters tall, elevating the round shape above the surrounding seabed rather than letting it rest flush against the mud like a typical boulder or wreck would. The nearly 300-meter groove running away from the object gave early investigators the impression that whatever this was, it may have either fallen from somewhere and skidded to a stop, or been moved into place by natural forces like ice or shifting currents over an extremely long period of time. To a non-scientist looking at the raw sonar return, especially the low-resolution, poorly calibrated version that first circulated in 2011 and 2012, the combination of a smooth circular shape, an elevated base, and a drag mark was enough to fuel speculation for years. It is easy to see, even now, why so many people jumped straight to dramatic conclusions. A shape that clean, sitting that deliberately in the middle of a sea that has been sailed and mapped for over 1,000 years, does not look like something you would expect to just stumble across by accident. As public interest grew, so did scrutiny from the actual scientific community. And this is where the story starts to get more complicated. Marine geologists pointed out early on that the Baltic Sea is an unusually difficult body of water to scan accurately. It has distinct layers of varying salinity and temperature, created by a mix of freshwater rivers flowing in and saltwater from the North Sea flowing through narrow straits. These layered water conditions can bend and distort sonar signals in ways that make ordinary geological features look far more artificial and symmetrical than they actually are on close inspection. In other words, the very sea this anomaly was found in is famous among scientists for producing misleading sonar readings. Follow-up expeditions eventually collected physical rock samples directly from the site, and the results were, for UFO believers, disappointing. The samples came back as ordinary granite, gneiss, and sandstone, three rock types that are extremely common throughout the region and are consistent with materials shaped and deposited by glaciers during the last ice age. Hanumant Singh, an oceanographer affiliated with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, one of the most respected marine research institutions in the world, examined the original sonar imagery and described it bluntly as virtually useless, explaining that its strange, artificial-looking distortions were most likely the product of a cheap and badly calibrated sonar unit, rather than evidence of an actual structure. According to this assessment, the entire viral sensation may have been built on a technical glitch rather than a genuine anomaly. The leading scientific explanation today treats the Baltic Sea formation as a natural glacial deposit rather than a man-made or extraterrestrial object. During the last ice age, massive glaciers moved slowly across what is now Scandinavia and the Baltic seabed, carrying enormous boulders and depositing them in seemingly random locations. As the ice melted and retreated thousands of years ago, it is entirely possible for a large boulder to end up sitting on a raised mound of sediment, and for smaller debris around it to create the illusion of a groove or drag mark, all without any intelligent design or intervention whatsoever. Supporting this theory, a geological review published in 2023 by a research team led by a scientist named Lee examined how natural processes occurring on ocean floors around the world can produce surprisingly precise, almost geometric shapes without any external help. Processes like fluid expulsion, where gas or liquid trapped beneath the seabed pushes upward and outward, and gas venting, where pockets of gas escape from sediment layers over time, were shown to be capable of carving remarkably symmetrical formations. This research gave scientists a plausible, entirely natural mechanism that could account for a circular, mound-like structure appearing on the Baltic Sea floor without needing to invoke aliens, secret military hardware, or lost civilizations. Even marine archaeologists who remain publicly skeptical of the more sensational theories have acknowledged that the shape is, at the very least, unusual. One archaeologist familiar with the case admitted that, while the formation does look strange, nature has been known to produce far stranger things than a suspiciously round rock. That single admission is important because it captures exactly why this case has never been fully closed, the way similar viral mysteries usually are. Even the scientists who believe it is natural are not dismissing it outright. They are simply saying the natural explanation is currently the most likely one. If the story ended there, with rock samples and a glacial explanation, this would just be another debunked internet rumor from over a decade ago. But that is not where the story ends, and that is exactly why people are still talking about it in 2026. A handful of specific details from the original data have never been fully explained to everyone's satisfaction. The height of the pillar beneath the circular formation, standing a full 8 meters off the seafloor, is taller than what most geologists would expect from a simple boulder resting in sediment. The nearly 300-meter groove trailing away from the site also raised questions that a straightforward glacial deposit does not fully answer, since glacial boulders typically do not leave drag marks of that length and consistency. These lingering, unresolved details are precisely what kept researchers, independent investigators, and a small but persistent community of scientifically minded skeptics coming back to the Baltic Sea anomaly year after year, long after the mainstream media had moved on to the next viral story. It is worth remembering that, even now, only somewhere between 5 and 20% of the world's oceans have been thoroughly explored and mapped. The remaining 80 to 95% remains largely unknown, simply because deep ocean environments are expensive, dangerous, and technically difficult to study in detail. Against that backdrop, a single unresolved anomaly sitting in a relatively shallow 91 meters of water was never going to stay buried in old news archives forever. In the summer of 2025, a new chapter in this story began, and it looks nothing like the earlier amateur treasure hunting dives. A new organization called Deep Blue Explorers formed specifically to take another serious look at the site, and this time, the expedition brought in outside scientific and technological partners instead of relying purely on independent divers chasing a viral story. The team included CQR Robotics, a company that supplies advanced underwater drones capable of operating at depth with far more precision than the equipment available back in 2011. It also included a French research group called Sigma 2, which specializes in studying unidentified anomalous phenomena using rigorous scientific methodology rather than speculation. Perhaps most notably, the expedition brought in scientists from Stockholm University, including Dr. Beatrice Villaruel, a researcher known for her work on the Vasco project, an initiative dedicated to searching for astronomical anomalies using historical and modern sky survey data. Her involvement signals that this new investigation is being treated as a legitimate scientific inquiry, not just another tabloid-driven expedition chasing viewers and clicks. The equipment used in 2025 also represented a massive technological leap forward. Multi-beam sonar systems, which can produce far more detailed and accurate three-dimensional images than the single-beam sonar used in 2011, were deployed alongside sub-bottom profiling technology, a method that allows researchers to see beneath the surface layer of sediment and understand what lies underneath the object itself, not just its outer shape. According to interviews and accounts published between 2025 and 2026, 3 specific findings keep resurfacing among the researchers involved in this renewed investigation. None of these threads definitively answer the UFO question in one way or the other, but each one has the potential to either strengthen or weaken different competing theories once the full data is released and independently verified. The first thread involves the sub-bottom profiling results, which suggest that the object appears to be resting on top of a distinct layer of sediment rather than growing directly out of the surrounding bedrock as a natural formation typically would. If confirmed, this detail matters quite a bit, because it would mean the object was placed or deposited on the seafloor at some point rather than forming in place over geological time, which keeps both the glacial deposit theory and the more exotic theories technically alive, depending on how the placement happened. The second thread involves scrape marks and possible traces of high temperature exposure found on or near the object. These details, if verified, could suggest some kind of impact or thermal event, though researchers have been careful not to jump to conclusions about what might have caused it. It could be consistent with a natural process, a historical event unrelated to the object's mysterious reputation, or something that requires further explanation entirely. The scientists involved are treating this as an open thread rather than proof of anything sensational, but its presence in multiple accounts from 2025 and 2026 suggests it is a real feature of the site, not just internet exaggeration. The third thread relates to the funding and operational structure of the expedition itself, with participants mentioning attempts to finance their research through commercial partnerships and projects, rather than relying solely on wreck hunting profits like the original 2011 team did. This detail remains officially unverifiable until the expedition publishes transparent funding sources and a full public account of their research scope. But it does suggest a shift toward a more institutionally credible investigation compared to the treasure hunting origins of this entire saga. As of the most recent reporting in the middle of 2026, the scientific consensus still leans heavily toward a natural explanation. Just this past week, outlets covering the story have reiterated that the leading theory remains a glacial rock formation, shaped by ice age processes and distorted in early sonar imagery due to the Baltic Sea's notoriously difficult scanning conditions. The original 2011 sonar image, the one that started this entire phenomenon, has been repeatedly described by credentialed oceanographers as low quality and misleading, a technical artifact, rather than genuine evidence of anything extraordinary. And yet, the case has not been formally closed, and that distinction matters enormously. Unlike many viral internet mysteries that get thoroughly debunked and then fade away completely, the Baltic Sea anomaly has continued to attract serious, credentialed researchers more than a decade after its discovery. The involvement of Stockholm University, the Vasco project's lead scientist, a specialized anomaly research group, and advanced robotics companies in 2025 tells us that at least some corners of the scientific community still consider this site worth the time, money, and effort required to investigate properly. Researchers involved in the most recent expeditions have described this situation as an open case, one that is genuinely interesting but still evidentially inconclusive on several key points, particularly regarding the sediment layer findings and the scrape and temperature traces that keep showing up in multiple independent accounts. The next real turning point in this story will come when Deep Blue explorers and their scientific partners release their full findings from the 2025 expedition in a form that can be independently reviewed and verified by other researchers. Rather than filtered through interviews and secondhand accounts, multi-beam sonar data and sub-bottom profiling results, if published transparently, could finally settle whether the object truly sits on a distinct sediment layer, what the scrape and heat traces actually represent, and whether the involvement of astronomical anomaly researchers like Dr. Villarroel uncovers any connection nobody has considered yet. Until that data becomes public, the Baltic Sea anomaly remains exactly what it has been for over a decade, one of the very few viral ocean mysteries that refuses to be neatly filed away as either solved or debunked. It sits in that rare and uncomfortable middle ground where the most likely explanation is almost certainly mundane, a big glacial rock shaped by ice age forces and made stranger by bad sonar equipment, but where a handful of stubborn, unresolved details keep pulling serious scientists back to the same 91 meters of dark, cold Baltic water year after year, expedition after expedition. So the next time someone tells you the Baltic Sea anomaly was solved back in 2012, remind them that as recently as this year, university researchers, robotics companies, and anomaly specialists were still out there in the Gulf of Bothnia, running multi-beam sonar over that same 60-meter circular shape, still trying to explain that 8-meter pillar and that 300-meter groove. Maybe it really is just an unusually shaped rock, And one day soon, the data will prove it beyond any reasonable doubt. Or maybe there is a detail in that sediment layer nobody has fully explained yet. Either way, more than 14 years after it was first discovered, scientists are still down there, still scanning and still stuck.